My father, George Shackleton, met and married my mother at Scar. My dad came from Keighley and he was already working for Bradford Corporation. My dad was the motor driver mechanic up at Scar. That's him in the middle. He was the #1 vehicle driver and he used to go into the towns for provisions and supplies and so forth. Could do anything with motors, my dad. My dad had 3 younger brothers that he more or less looked after and brought up after their parents had died young. There was Abe, Arthur and Albert. They all worked up at Scar. My mum's name was Isabella Iderson. She was born at Bladen on Tyneside, and her father had seen it advertised that they needed people at Scar. With 7 or 8 people in a 2 up 1 down, the bairns had to fly the nest. She was just a little girl, only 15 when she was sent down on the train. No coat, just a parcel under her arm. Never been away from Bladen. Someone met her at Pateley station. My mum went to work for Mrs. Venables in one of the hostels. She was really frightened. But when she saw how beautiful it was, and of course they were all strangers together, and she met lots of other young girls like herself, she loved it. She said they treated her like a little lady. She used to wait on tables, make the beds, clear the pots and so on, and the Irish navvies used to give her tips. She said she'd never known anything like it, a good wage. After sharing a bedroom with 7 brothers and sisters, it was luxury. So she used to send her wages home and just live off her tips. Everybody loved Scar. Well, it was that modern compared to houses that were on the go that only had oil lamps. I mean, they had electricity, bathrooms, hot and cold running water, and it was only the 20s and 30s. That's a photo of one of the hostel landladies' outings. That's me dad driving. So my mum and dad met and married at Scar. They had the honeymoon at the Talbot Hotel in Pateley Bridge. Millie come along, then 2 or 3 years later George come along. All my mum wanted was her little lad. Then Joseph come along and then me, Veronica, Vera. I came along after they'd moved. One day my mum was having a bad day and George, who was only 3, was wowing on and she had a lot of work to do. So she said to his uncle, "Arthur, will you take him with you?" Arthur was putting snares out for rabbits. So Arthur bought George some jelly babies at the shop, Cooper's, and the little lad trotted with him all the way up to Angram. When they got to Bridge End, Arthur said to George, "Now look, you sit on that wall and don't move till I get back." I mean, he didn't want to take him with him in case other people had put snares down. 5 minutes is a long time when you're a little lad. And he must have swung his legs over the other side of the wall and jumped down. But it's deeper on the other side and he couldn't get back up. So he'd wandered. And he'd wandered where they didn't think a little laddie could wander on account of it being so steep. Being a baby, not but 3 years old, and it being March, and it being so cold. Despite the fact he was wearing the woolies, my mum always knit for us. Well. Arthur came back and he panicked when he wasn't there. He didn't know what to do. I mean, he shouted, but what with the echo, all he could hear was his own voice. So he hobbled back to the village as quick as he could and he sounded the alarm.
Dad had come from work. We were having our tea. There was a knock on the door and Ray Calvert was standing there. And he told us young George Shackleton was missing and search parties were being immediately organised to go out and look for him. Father put on his coat, collected the carbide lamp from his motorcycle and went out to join all the men in the village. The men went out with hurricane lamps and there were people with horses and that. Scar village were like a ghost town. There were over 60 navvies in each hostel. But when that little lad went missing, the whole place just stopped while they were looking for the little boy. I'll never forget atmosphere. Normally up there it was terribly noisy all the time, what with blasting of the rock and the steam cranes and engines and a crashing and banging all day long. But it just died, did the place, when the little lad went missing. It was just like a ghost town. The men searched all through the night, but to no avail, and in the morning they all assembled to go to work. Mr. Newlands, resident engineer, he thanked all men for turning up for work, but he said there'd been nothing done on the site until the little lad were found. Police had been brought in and were convinced that Georgie were in Reservoir. Parties were detailed to various places to search further. Boats were gathered, and a large navy whaler that was on Gouthwaite were brought up. In happier times, this whaler had been used to take Sunday school trips across Gouthwaite for their afternoon treats. Some men, Ray Calvert in particular, were adamant that the best plan of action was to line the men up in rows and walk the moor back to the village. But it was decided that a little lad couldn't traverse the rough ground so far, so search in that direction were called off, and dragging at Reservoir continued.
5 or 6 days later, 2 Bradford hikers come over the moor from the Grassington direction. According to my auntie, one of them was a medium, and she said to the other, "You walk on yon side of the wall, and I'll look over here, because I've a feeling I'm on the right track for that little lad." They found him. He was curled up under a bush with his head on his arm, as if he'd just gone to sleep. There was a patch of grass worn away nearby where he'd walked round and round. If only he'd been able to get back over the wall, he'd have seen the village lights.
They'd spent too much time on Reservoir. Aye, it were a bad job that. It were a bad do.
The reservoir water is scattered with boats. The men were tirelessly on, and high above on the side of the hill, a little boy wanders alone. He cannot hear his uncle's call, nor yet look over the dry stone wall, to where in the fading twilight below Scar village lights faintly glow. The lapwing wheels, the sandpiper cries, there's no one to heed their alarm. And far below, in a nest of his own, lies a bird with his head on his arms. Among the wandering rams and sheep, a little boy quietly falls asleep. He dreams of home, his mother's kind hands, and the ewes are calling out to lost lambs.